working with Councilor Mador to clearly identify and clarify that there is no vacant buildable lands model for the rural area. What has been approved by previous board is the vacant buildable lands model for the urban area. Okay, so what have we done in the past when it comes to how we estimate potential number of lots in the rural area? We do so by what I call a very simple analysis. If you're going to put some X number of growth in the rural area, you want to make sure that there is some capacity, if you will. It's not an inventory. We don't go out anymore and do a windshield traditional way of doing an inventory. What we do is we approach our GIS staff and ask them, based on the current zoning, what is the potential additional lot that could be created? That's how it is done. And you can verify that by talking to Bob Poole or Ken Perot, who is in the audience. Since 1994, there has never been any approved model or vacant buildable lands model for the rural area, and I will continue to maintain that. Why? We don't think it's necessary. We have never done that. We have never come to the board and said, approve this model so that we can use it to run a vacant buildable lands analysis for the rural area. You will not find any document or any date that the previous board or this council approved that. You will find staff with GIS present reviewing the urban vacant buildable lands model with the council. And if there are any changes proposed, that change is authorized by the board, not by staff. So there is nothing, no document, nothing that you will find that says this is the written model that we use, or the county staff use, or the GIS staff use to estimate or do any inventory in the rural area. I know this is not short, but I will show you that there is none.
So, so this document that you provided us, estimating potential rural housing and employment in Clark County, Washington, this is what you use, the logic and background record for the information that ESA came up with in the DEIS.
Exactly, and the only reason we did that is to show our work. Should we be asked to at least say, how did we come up with the numbers that are on or provided in the DEIS? This is just a documentation of that, nothing more than that.
Okay, so the fact that we have it here would lead me to believe that it's not covert.
No.
Okay. Thank you.
And I know you have stopped taking public testimony. I have served so many boards, and I can go back to so many of them, including Commissioner Berisu, who is in the audience. At no time has any board directed planning staff or GIS staff to develop a rural vacant model. Never.
Mr. Chairman, I'd like to make a correction here. I don't know if it's semantics or what it is, but those records that get exported by GIS from our map, the 28,012 records, they don't just simply get reported to us. Staff has not provided, has not shown their work, the planning assumptions that take them from what those numbers were to what we see. And what happens in between is the software. And you are right in that we have never authorized we've never had a overt VBLM, rural vacant buildable lands model, that has been approved. However, be very careful that that is not a denial of the software that has been used to go from this point to this point. Those software rules were reverse engineered, and they show up in column A. They have been used. It does exist. It has changed the numbers, And that is something that's been happening behind the scenes without the knowledge or the approval of any county commissioners until finally they were reverse engineered and it became clear. So these do exist. If you feel like they don't exist and somehow these numbers haven't been acting on the numbers to end up with the tallies that we have, then please specify which ones do not.
Councilor Madore, most of the items, many of the items that you put in column A are exported from the urban vacant buildable lands model. For example, you say, well, there's a 15% urban market factor, so there should be a rural market factor. You have taken things that apply to
Ms. Cook, let me, please, excuse me.
Councilor
What
Madam, I'm
you're
going to
speaking of-
jump in now.
Okay.
Because we have,
I understand, but there's a point here I need to
do
clarify.
not, sir, falsely accuse your planning staff of denial or covertly presenting information. I have worked here for over 20 years, and I've been honest. I have very, very talented staff, and no one has ever misled any commissioners. Now, I have Ken Perot here, who I have worked with for over 25 years. Ken and Bob, do we have a written and approved vacant buildable lands model for the rural area?
Ken Perot, P-E-A-R-R-O-W, Clark County
Can't hear.
GIS. Oh,
Sorry.
You could move in a
oh,
little
okay,
closer.
sorry. Can you hear me now?
Yes, thank you.
Yes. No, you're correct. We've always run a rural analysis, and primarily at the request to come up with numbers in the rural area so we can look at, our capital facilities planning, what kind of transportation impacts would be out in the rural area, and also in terms of schools, how much impact there would be for schools. So we've come up with a number in terms of how many potential lots might be out there, and we try to use the best information that we have available to do such a thing. So we look at, the assessor information, we look at our zoning information, we look at other types of information that makes that number the best possible number we can come up with. It's never been approved by the board. We try to be consistent as much as we can with what the urban model does so that there's some consistency there. But that's the primary purpose, was to look at capital facility planning.
And I want to praise our GIS staff. GIS staff, Bob Poole, Ken Perot, Barbara Hatman, each of you have been fabulous. You've been truth tellers. You've provided full disclosure. You've provided all of the facts and all of the data that we depend on. And I don't have the slightest reservation. You guys really need to be recognized for stellar work. Whatever software is given to you by planning the directives, that's what you crank out, and and rightfully so. The problem is that this software has never been, that changes these numbers, that ended up being needed to be used by GIS, has never been known to the counselors, and certainly not approved by the counselors. I would like to make one point here, Chris, and that is that you somehow are leading us to believe that column A is not the original planning assumptions. Please understand that any references to the urban planning assumptions are simply references. They're just simply mentioned, but they are not asserted. The one point that you stated here, somehow the one that references dividable lands, it doesn't say to change that. It says that it's documenting what is there. That planning assumption number 4 says, every rural parcel shall be counted as a parcel that will divide to the maximum degree possible. That planning assumption is in context with the other. Context is provided. But if you differ on any of these column A assumptions and somehow assert that they are not directing the software that has if-then statements and case statements and formulas in there, I mean, if any of these do not fully convey what is happening in that software that change those numbers, please point it out. They're all numbered 1 through 8.
Let's see, where's the forest one? Is that number 2? Because that's,
Yes.
Flat
And
out
well, number
wrong.
1 and 2.
because in the software, as I understand it, commercial forest properties with in current use were not counted.
I verified that last night. I've got the latest data from GIS and verified that sure enough, they were counted. The numbers are there, they are counted. Hundreds of extra lots were counted, even though the DSEIS says that they were not counted. I have the proof that shows they were. Our GIS staff has the data that shows they were.
I believe for the DSCIS, they were excluded in the forest zones. They were not excluded in other zones, but for the DSCIS, we did exclude forest lands that are in the forest zones.
That might have been the intention, the intention, but I verified, Bob Poole sent me the data yesterday. We went through it and checked it, and whoops, sure enough, it was counted.
Okay.
And I'd just like to add one more thing. We also, we studied 4 alternatives there, or ran the model on 4 alternatives. We ran the same model for each alternative. We didn't decide to change the model for one alternative over the other. It was the same assumptions, same criteria for all 4 alternatives.
Actually, there was an error on alternative 4, those 28,812 records, parcels. They're the same for the same parcels for 1 and 4. All we do is change the zoning, potential zoning on them. 1,405 records of the forest parcels got
Okay.
miscoded, and so they got, and the numbers got inflated for alternative 4 by accident, and that's okay. But it's our response to correct that, and that's planning's
Excuse me.
responsibility to correct that.
Thank you. Thank you, sir.
Okay.
Good job.